Every life has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Your story, my story, and our story speak of victory and defeat, joy and sorrow, resilience and vulnerability. They are not just our story, they are Christ's story in us. They are Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
Welcome to Kingdom Stories from Down Under. Tonight I am with Phil East. Phil East, we have traveled the world together. We've done so many wonderful things. We've been in the jungles of Sulawesi together. We've also been on the mountains of the Himalayas in Nepal. We've also been on the beach and through nice walks. We've also shared the gospel and worship together. And his life is full of adventure. And there's so much packed into this amazing life. And I can't wait to share this with you. Phil, welcome to the show.
Always good to be with you, wherever we are.
Man, we've done a lot together.
We've done a few things, haven't we?
Yeah. I think I've known you for about 8 or 10 years.
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Through the Southern Cross initially. We were both pastors in the Southern Cross. And initially we probably only met at advances and the occasional, Southern Cross advance. But then more so at Churchlands, where we journeyed a lot more. Yeah. And then we got even closer. We started walking together and doing bush walks.
Yeah, that's right. We know things about each other that other people don't want to know.
Well, let's see how much we do reveal tonight or don't reveal tonight. All right. Let's rewind. We got to take you from the beginning.
Sure.
You were born in Canberra?
No, I was actually born in rural Western Australia.
Oh, you were born here and then you went to Canberra.
Correct.
Okay. Whereabouts?
A small country town about 2 hours from Perth.
East or south?
I don't know, Gamalling, 2 hours from here.
Okay.
To a young farming couple. Yeah, they'd just been married and they're 19 or 20. And so the firstborn in a very small, isolated part of Western Australia.
What were they farming?
Oh, they were just farm labourers, wheat and sheep farm.
Wheat and sheep, yeah. And how long were you there?
Very few memories. As farms in Australia, like America, became really large in the late 60s, they sort of left the land and came to Perth.
Okay.
And
how old were you when you moved to Perth?
5 or 6, yeah.
Do you remember much of the...
No, not at all. No, very little. But fascinatingly...
Is there photos? You got photos?
Maybe, but fascinatingly, my mum, and she's the only one in her whole family, actually got saved as a teenager in a country town when they were listening to Billy Graham crusades on the radio.
Whoa.
So it's fascinating that she got saved as a teenager. My dad got saved, and they're the only ones still today in their whole families that are Christian. And interestingly, both their children are Christian, and 4 of their 5 grandchildren are in church living for God. So, I just happen to be privileged to be born into
already Christians.
Born into an imperfect, but nevertheless, family that introduced evangelical Christianity that has become a part of my life in a real way for 30 years now.
It's interesting because we don't think that the Billy Graham crusades would have had such an impact even through the radio. Naturally, in the stadium, we know of the transformations he brought to the city. But even through the radio in a small town...
In the early 1960s.
That's powerful.
Yeah, communities getting together, families getting together.
To listen
to that. So I don't know a lot about it, but I do know that my parents are in large families like you are, that you had of 8 to 10.
Yeah.
And the only one in either side happened to be my parents. So imperfect Christianity, but certainly gave me a foundation for what became personal to my life in the teenage years.
So then you moved to Perth, and that's when you begin to remember more and more.
Yeah, but not a whole lot.
What did you love doing as a kid?
I just like most Australian children, playing sport and not focusing too much on their studies.
What was your favourite sport?
The main two here. You don't really have much choice growing up, especially in the 70s in Perth. And
what were you good at?
None of them. My children were a lot better than me because I married someone that was smarter than me and had better sporting genes than me.
Okay. Yeah. What do you remember of childhood?
Wasn't negative, wasn't positive, just went about life. I guess I was the firstborn, so just...
And then you had a little brother?
Sister.
Sister.
Yeah, but not close. You know, just
How many years apart?
Couple of years.
That's close.
But, you know, not really close in what we did in life.
Yeah.
And then I got really saved as a teenager, and then...
Did you have a rebellious period? Did you have a questioning period?
Oh, not really. You know, always knew that what my parents had was better than what was in general society.
So you were going to church on a regular basis?
Not regular, but my parents were, you know, they were churchgoers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the greatest legacies they passed on to me, they never had a negative view of church.
Yeah.
So interesting, this is one thing I do remember from my teenage years. Many of their friends dropped out of church
Mm-hmm.
for legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
But my parents irregularly kept going and kept a good attitude.
Yes.
And fascinatingly, of all their friends, maybe I'm one of the few that's still in church because they stayed in church.
Yeah.
So in my books and in my teaching, one thing I say is really important, especially as fathers who are to lead their homes, is to be in church in good times and bad times.
Wonderful.
So that's a legacy I think that they've left. They've left
Especially
a legacy of
fathers. You're pointing something very, very where it hurts here in Australia. The fathers are missing from the church.
Sure.
And from the lives of so many young children.
And the families that I see that are strong, there's either been a strong father or a grandfather.
Sure.
And
so your dad was a man of faith who was always...
Yeah, certainly. And by his own admission was never a great theologian, but was in church. And, you know, they've left a legacy of church attendance, faith and fidelity in what was at times a difficult marriage.
Mm.
And still they're still together.
And your sister?
She's had her ups and downs.
Yeah.
You know, she's gone through more of her ups and downs in life and relationships than I have.
Yeah.
Whereas I've been never caused my mum and dad any great pain or anguish, neither of my kids.
So you were a teenager. How did you receive the Lord?
I was at teachers' college actually, and really...
So this was after high school, you went to become a teacher?
Yeah, I went to teachers' college and thought the humanistic way of life wasn't that good. And I actually...
Was that at Churchlands?
No, I went to Mount Lawley.
Mount Lawley, all right.
And...
you know, we live where the teachers' college was.
Yeah, I do know that.
Campus.
Yeah, nice piece of land there. They're smart, that university, selling off the good land. Yeah, and so I was just doing a holiday job and met this really radical Christian. And what attracted me about his Christianity, it was more radical, it wasn't passive. And he invited me to his church where they had an American evangelist preach, and I was attracted by the masculinity, actually.
Okay.
Which was quite different to the Christianity I was
raised in. You met this guy at uni?
Workplace.
Or at work?
Yeah, I was working in the holidays to make some money.
What were you doing?
What was I doing? Labouring work on a dam site.
And this guy was a Christian?
Very fanatical, was preaching to everyone, was like a John the Baptist.
And he took you to church? Or he
he invited me and a friend that I went to university with. We thought we'd go and check it out.
Which church was this? It
was a Foursquare church, a church plant from the American Foursquare in Mount Lawley.
Okay.
And it was radical, and lots of young people.
Quite Pentecostal, isn't it?
Radical.
Radical Pentecostal.
Radical Pentecostal, speaking in tongues. But what impressed me, this old Presbyterian building was full.
Yeah.
With 100, 150 mainly young people. That was enough to get me back.
Okay.
And so that really...
So where were you going beforehand?
Oh, nowhere.
Nowhere. So at that period, it was...
No, nominal.
Where were your parents going?
If they were going anywhere, it would have been a Baptist or a Church of Christ, probably. Okay. We're looking a long time ago, you know, we're looking 30, nearly 40 years ago.
That's fine.
Yeah, so it was...
So you went to this meeting, and when did it click for you? When did
I went back a few times. It really triggered, I guess, what was in my heart,
you
know, the desire for the things of God. And because it was American, some of the things that Americans do as a 58-year-old probably aren't that positive, whereas when I was an 18-year-old, it was kind of, cool. You know, very, very positive, yeah. So it was... And it was revival. And what was fascinating, some of the people I knew from Teachers College had got saved, were going there. So I already had, even though I didn't have friends that were going there, I had some quick connections. Yeah, and was powerfully born again soon after that, filled with the Holy Spirit within a year.
Do you remember the night or the day when you...
Yeah, I do.
Turned?
Yeah, it was sometime in December 1981, so a long time ago. And soon after that, filled with the Holy Spirit. And within a year,
what was happening in that night? Was it an altar call?
Yeah, a standard altar call that many people went down and responded to. because so many people were getting saved
Yeah.
here in the early 80s, and the same on the East Coast. That's where the Christian cities and the CLCs came out of, here in Perth, Rima, Inner City Faith, New Day. There was something happening the late 70s.
And did you
early
get
80s.
baptized soon after that?
I actually got baptized in the Spirit.
First.
Yeah, I actually got baptized. I actually had a conversion experience as a teenager somewhere else.
Okay.
And got baptized in water then.
Yes.
And then I just got baptized in the Spirit in this Pentecostal church.
How did that happen? Was it a special meeting or just in an assembly?
I was seeking it, got prayed for in a special meeting, and then went home and read the Don Basham book about being filled with the Spirit. And it happened.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And
then a call to preach the gospel. So within 1 year, my whole life was turned around.
Were you married or not yet married?
Oh, I was 18, so
Okay.
a long way off being married.
And how did your parents react to all this?
Oh, they were happy. Happy I was going to church rather than the nightclubs and the hotels. So.
And
No,
was
we-
your sister part of this journey in any shape or form?
not at all.
No, she was ignorant at the time.
Doing our own thing, yeah.
Okay. So what was your first job after Teachers College?
Well, I actually never finished Teachers College because I got saved, filled with the Spirit of God.
Was that a
called to be
3-year course
preacher.
or 2 years?
3 years back then. And then I thought, oh, well, I'll join the public service.
Oh, okay.
So what
Not
was-
as a graduate, but
No, just joined, which was great because, as you know from your experience, public service is a wonderful place. You get reasonable pay, not a huge amount, but reasonable pay. You
Good
turn
job.
up to work,
do your part.
do your part, then you've got lots of free time to go and do other things with
Yeah.
your life. So for me, it was running Bible studies, outreaches, studying.
Basically
to
at 3
prepare.
o'clock or 4 o'clock when you left the office, you
Yeah.
didn't have to think about
Correct.
anything else.
And you had enough money, not to
Ju-
get rich, but enough to do what you needed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were preaching, you were teaching, what were you doing?
Yeah, more sort of studying, running home groups.
Okay.
And then after 5 years, basically an apprenticeship style church, went out to start a church with my wife of 1 year.
Okay, so when did you meet Jan?
Oh, she was in the church, got saved about the same time as me.
Okay,
And,
same church.
Yeah, same church. She'd seen
So
each
she
other
was
a few
part of the
times.
youth, part of the landscape.
Well, there was no youth because it was a church full of young people. So
It was a youth church.
yeah, if you're a 30-year-old, and even the pastor wasn't even 30.
So when did you notice her? How did you notice her?
Well, look, I think, come sort of early 20s, I sort of thought, it's a good time to start looking around. And she was from a higher economic status than mine and a very devout woman and had lots of qualities that were attractive to me. So she was interested in me. So after a bit
She
of
was
persistence,
interested in you.
after a bit of persistence,
Yeah.
so we kind of got married in 1986, and then a year later went off to start a church in Canberra.
So she had the passion of ministry. as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Was there a value for you in looking for the right person with whom
Sure.
you're going to
Look,
spend the rest of your life?
for me, the two indispensables or non-negotiables were willingness to have children
Yeah.
and willingness to go and start a church somewhere.
Okay. And
If they weren't there,
did you
it
tell
would have
her
looked
that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because, to me, they're important questions to
Of
ask.
course. How did you get that clarity?
Well, I think if you know what you're called to do, it's a lot easier. And I know
So you
Reinhard
are-
Bonnke, the great preacher to Africa, said when he was dating women, if they had no interest in going to Africa, the relationship was over. So I think it's better to be upfront from the start. And I wanted
So
to
you
have children.
you had that clarity. You knew what the call of
Absolutely.
God on your life was from
Absolutely.
that early age.
Absolutely.
That's a powerful conviction.
Well, I think if you know, then you focus your whole life. And that's one reason I chose the job I chose.
So where did you plant your first church?
I went to Canberra to start a church and, a very
For that
challenging
purpose?
place.
You moved from here to
Yeah,
Canberra?
I was sponsored. I was great. The church I was in was far from perfect, but back in 1986, they invested $50,000 or $60,000 in an untried person.
Big
And
risk.
A big risk, and I paid them back.
Yeah.
Not that I had to, but I did.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty tough. But if you
So
want to do
shifted-
that,
You moved with Jan to
yeah,
Canberra.
yeah, they sponsored the whole thing, which was great, and got a job in public service.
How did they find out about you?
Who's that? Sorry.
The people in Canberra.
I just went there and started a church.
Okay.
Put up a sign, door knocked, handed out flyers.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Hard-
brand new church plant.
Hardcore.
And you were working in the public service at
Yeah,
the same time.
yeah,
So you didn't
yeah.
have to depend on the income of the church in that early
Correct.
stage.
They gave me a month's salary just to get settled in.
Wonderful.
And look, because I was in my mid-20s, lots of energy,
Yeah.
lots of time.
And Jan was working as well?
just briefly because she was already pregnant. So Amanda, our firstborn, was born within a few weeks of the church opening.
So Amanda was born in Canberra.
Raised in church, within church in the first week of her birth.
Wow.
So she's a Canberran. Yeah.
That's why she's so smart, because she was born in a Canberra.
And she's just come back from Canberra, loves Canberra. So yeah.
Okay. She probably prefers the cooler weather to the warm.
Yeah, and a different style of people, I guess,
Yeah.
and different climate, yeah.
Was it tough planting the church? Or you
Oh,
had the
incredibly
energy?
tough. And, I often thought you wouldn't want to do this if you're over 30.
Yeah.
It was
The
just...
hours, the energy, the...
Absolutely. Working a full-time job, getting home, having a baby at home, doing a midweek Bible study, 1 or 2 services a week.
Yeah.
But, we worked hard, and within 3 years, we had, a core of 30 people
Yeah.
and mainly converts.
Yeah.
So I was able to cut down to 3 days a week and then 2 days a week, which was probably when I was my most effective,
Yes.
where I still had 2 days in the workforce,
Yeah.
which took financial pressure off the church and off me
Yeah.
and kept me grounded.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I
So-
did that for 12 years.
And then the boys came along.
Yeah, well, they were all in church, so we had 3.
So everyone born in Canberra.
Everyone born in Canberra, raised in Canberra, didn't come here till their teenage years.
And you carried on working for the federal government or state? Was it?
Worked for the federal there, yeah, in a number of different departments.
Okay.
And then
There was
full-time.
always work there, wasn't there?
Always work, and was full-time pastoring for a while, but I was actually less effective when I was full-time pastoring than I was working a couple of days in the government.
I think you're relaxed then, because you've got time, and you probably. Whereas when you only have this amount of time, you just have to focus and get things done. But then your focus changes because it spreads for the
Yeah,
whole
and I
week.
think you work smarter. Whereas
Yeah.
if all you do is church work, unless you're a large church like
Yeah.
Kingdom City with hundreds,
Yeah.
if you're at a church under 100, 150,
You can manage.
You can do it. And I've seen it all over Asia. Most
do it.
effective guys, they
We've always done it.
they work jobs and
Yeah.
less financial pressure.
Oh, easy.
And I think you're more grounded. That's how I was.
And you're forced to use other people. I mean, not use other people, but make use of other people in the sense they have to pull their weight.
And I think, Nathaniel, they realise if you're working 2 or 3 days a week, and still, for me, I was preaching 2 fresh sermons a week,
Sure.
and because we do Friday night church, outreach church, so I'd have a motivational message, 30 minutes Sunday and a midweek Bible study.
Yeah.
They saw I was doing that, plus had 3 kids at home, so they can do something.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So, what were the challenges of Canberra?
Well, it's probably the most difficult city in Australia to start a church.
New age or just comfort?
Just comfort, not too much money to realise money's not the answer.
Yeah.
Most of the people we reached were not public servants.
Ah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Students, people in private enterprise.
Yeah.
And I guess, a lot of those, and Canberra has lots of great churches.
Yes.
And when I first arrived, I went to all the great churches and said, I'm not coming to compete for your people.
Yeah.
We really focused on street ministry, unchurched people.
Yeah.
And so we were very happy. And once I got a Kingdom Revelation, I said to the people, if there's a better church to go to in the city, go
Just
there.
go.
Go there with my blessing.
Yeah.
Because I understood that I wasn't theologically trained at that stage,
Yes.
that I could only take people so far. And that's one reason I handed over the church. I realised I could only take the church so far. It was like a cap,
Yeah.
and I needed to go and do something else, including getting
It
educated.
matured, it was flowing, and you had good leadership behind. You left disciples behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, a couple of them took over the church.
Fantastic.
After a period of time. I really don't know where it's at today, but I do understand a couple that got directly saved through my ministry, pastored there and other places. But for me, it was a great foundation, and all the work I was able to do in Indonesia wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't had that 12 years pastoring. I could relate to pastors, but knew that it's not always something that someone wants to do for their whole ministry.
The process teaches you so much, and especially in
The
that
pain
period
and the
of life,
agony.
3 children, wife, kids, family, works,
Financial
everything.
pressures.
Yeah. Challenges.
Yeah.
And then what did you do? You moved back here?
No, well, we handed over the church and went into the wilderness, for the want of a better phrase, got a full-time job.
Yeah.
And
In Canberra?
In Canberra, and Jan went out to work as a teacher. She trained but never taught. And what was fascinating about...
Were you still going to the same church?
No, we transitioned. I really believe if you hand over a church, you need to go somewhere else.
Okay.
And
Just let them do. So there's
correct,
no pressure.
correct. And good for me. And went to a charismatic church for a year and a half and felt a real call to kingdom ministry there.
Yes.
Very spiritual. And then my ministry to Indonesia was birthed in a AOG, a CLC church.
That was in 2005?
So 1999 handed over the church last century,
Yeah.
and then the ministry to Indonesia started in 2002.
Awesome.
Then in late
So that was-
2005 we moved to Perth to be closer to Indonesia.
Well before the tsunami. Tsunami was in 2004, wasn't it? Yeah, I think so. I think it was in December 2004.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do any
Boxing Day.
skiing? Did you do any skiing while you were in
Well,
Canberra?
because we lived very simply and I wasn't a highly paid public servant, I've been to the ski fields but didn't do any skiing. My kids were all very good at cricket and football. They all represented the ACT in all those sports,
Yeah.
and so that consumed most of our weekends.
Okay, so you had to go.
So Saturdays we were at sporting field, Sunday in church. So when people say they haven't got time for things, well, I say I work full time. Kids never missed sport on Saturday, never missed church on Sunday. And then when we came to Perth, I took up study and never dropped those things. So yeah, you can do it.
Wonderful.
Balanced.
So what brought you back to Perth?
What brought me to Perth, really more than back, was I was ministering in Indonesia from Canberra, but it was a $1,200 trip.
Okay.
Each
so you wanted
way.
to be closer to where your heart was.
Yeah, and it sort of
So
worked
what
out.
attracted you to Indonesia the first time? How did you make that
Yeah,
connection?
well, look, I had a prophetic calling to the nations, and that happened in 1999 from Isaiah, a prophetic calling from there. And then 2002, when I started to get clarity about what I needed to do, the pastor at the church I was going to invited me to Russia, and someone else in the church invited me to Indonesia. I only went to Indonesia because it was cheaper. Met some key people that said, you can help our nation. So it was really prophetic.
Imagine if you had gone to Russia.
So what doors would have opened there? But look, Indonesia quickly became very affordable.
Where
And
did you
with
go
it,
first time?
just the big cities, Jakarta.
Jakarta.
Yeah, and nearby
Churches
cities.
or schools or university?
Yeah, school, drug rehabilitation centres and churches. But on that first trip, met key people that subsequently organised ministry in 2003, 2004. The doors were significantly open, preaching to churches of 10,000 people.
Wow.
And I thought, look, this is on the move, but I need to move to Perth. Like John Maxwell said, you've got to give up to go up.
Yes.
And so first we gave up the church, which
Yeah.
opened the kingdom ministry.
Yeah.
Left the comfort zone of Canberra.
Yeah.
Kids were all into it, difficult for Jan.
Yeah.
And came here, and then within months of being in Perth, a whole lot of doors open. So our ministry went from 2 to 3 out of 10 to 6 out of 10 very quickly.
6
Out of 10,
trips.
you know, as far as impact, you know,
Oh,
I
impact,
rated out of
impact,
10.
Yeah.
Within 6 months of arriving in Perth, doors open that are still
So both
open.
locally and internationally?
Mainly internationally, but because I went to Indonesian churches in Perth, they opened doors
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
to Indonesia.
Because you ended up going 4 or 5 times a year, even 6 times a
while
year.
working full time
Yeah.
and studying full time, was able to do it, and doors open. It was basically paid for itself.
So you went back to college, to Bible college first, and you did master?
No, I went to do my undergrad where I was working. Wanted me to do an undergrad in communications. I hadn't been to university till I was in my mid-40s. I've been there ever since, but yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So you were working for the state government then? Or still
No, federal government.
for federal government,
Yeah.
and they
Offered me a scholarship.
offered you a scholarship to go and do your degree
Yeah,
in
yeah.
communication.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So this opened obviously more possibilities for you to write, to preach.
Well,
was
fascinatingly, I wrote my first book before doing the communications degree, and it's still my most popular book.
because you haven't been distorted. You know, you had clarity. You had
Well, I
purity.
wrote it while I was working full time, kids at home, but it met a need. It was called The Power of Forgiveness. But yeah, so until...
You wrote that in English or in Indonesian?
Oh, in English, then translated. All my 6 books are all in Bahasa Indonesia.
Okay.
I wrote them in English, and then
Yeah.
some wrote them in Indonesian, even though I can proofread
But
Indonesian.
you don't print them in English. You only print them in
Yeah,
Indonesian
the
because
market's huge there. You know,
that's
until COVID shut down last year, I was busy there, and the demands were huge for
Yeah.
books and that sort of thing.
And obviously, Jan was journeying with you, and the kids were growing up. How did they adjust to Perth? Quite easy?
Oh, because they were into sport and all that, and they fitted immediately because the boys were very good immediately into cricket and football teams. So sport gives you acceptance in this culture.
You can
And
make
Amanda was
friends.
a football goal umpire, so she was with the local football league umpiring. Yeah, fitted in really well because a big, healthy and
She's
sporting.
a very strong leader, isn't she? She's got so many
Well,
qualities.
firstborn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the girl and the boys, with 2 boys around and the strong father
Canberra
figure.
educated.
Yeah.
No
Wonderful.
imposter syndrome problems with her.
Great. How are they journeying in their faith
Now or then?
then,
Look,
as teenagers?
I made a big mistake when I came to Perth because I was so focused on building my connections with the Indonesian church. I actually said, you go to a church you want to go to, but they were still young teenagers in the case of the boys.
Yes.
So I surrendered my headship and I had to be pulled into line over that. And then I took them to a charismatic church. And at this charismatic church, at that stage, a large charismatic church based in Balcatta,
Yeah.
they all had God encounters.
Wonderful.
So in the midst of the charismania of that large church, there was something of the presence of God.
Yeah.
So they all had their God encounters,
Wonderful.
and then they realised they wanted something a bit solider, and they all went off somewhere else, and they're all in different churches today.
So they're all walking with the Lord.
One goes to a modern evangelical, another one goes to a traditional Anglican, and another one goes to a modern Pentecostal, but they've all had their God encounters at this charismatic church.
The boys are married.
My sons are married, yep.
Amanda, not yet.
Not yet, but on the way.
On the
Hopefully
way.
this year.
Wonderful. One of them is a policeman.
One's a detective in the Western Australian Police Force.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one's a lawyer, now working on St George's Terrace. So my ceiling was certainly their foundation.
And Amanda works for the Water Corp, and she's
No, she's moved on. People complain about lack of jobs. She gets jobs all the time. Headhunted, now works back in a federal government department in a cyber security area.
in Canberra or in Perth.
Based in Perth, but it's a
Wonderful.
Canberra.
So is she still at home, or she's got her own place?
They've all got bigger mortgages than I ever had.
Well, they're young enough to pay for them.
Easily, yeah.
they've
Make
got the
more money
income.
than I ever made as
Yeah.
well.
Wonderful one. But it does give you a lot of satisfaction to see them in the faith, to see them well with their families, to see them having good jobs, and just to know that, they're well.
Yeah, and look, to me, we laid a foundation of putting our faith as a priority,
Yes.
hanging in there in difficult times,
Yeah.
putting the Lord first in our finances, in our life,
Yeah.
and we've seen the fruit so far.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
How's Jan? Jan's gone back to education. She's teaching.
Yeah, look, she's a very gifted person, and as you alluded to earlier, she's been involved in pastoral ministry. She's a true pastor. She's worked for a Christian organisation in a number of Christian organisations in numbers of roles, but she believes in the kingdom, and being in the state schools for her, even though it's very, very difficult,
Yeah.
she sees that for her that's the place to be, to have influence. And because she's got a full-time husband who does all the cooking and the cleaning and everything else, maybe not to her standards, but she gets dropped off at 7:30 in the morning and picked up at 5 at night.
Wonderful.
She can focus on that, but it's very difficult. And that's why for her, she says, Phil, when I go to church on Sunday, I need a rhema from God, not just a Bible study.
Yeah.
And so she's really at a stage. She's not in cruise mode. She's 60, but she's not in cruise mode.
Well, you made sure of that. I mean, you guys have climbed the Himalayas a couple of times.
Jan's done 5 treks to the Himalayas.
Annapurna.
I've done 6.
Okay.
And she's, not too many middle-aged Australian women have been to 5,416 metres, which is further than you've been. So, she's willing to take on challenges, reluctantly.
How far did we get? 5'2"?
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
About that.
Manaslu.
Yeah, tough, but 5'4" is tougher, I can tell you.
A couple of 100 metres more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's courageous, she's determined, she questions herself at times, but if she hangs in there a bit like trekking, she can get through.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the resilience.
Yeah.
And just putting up with you.
Absolutely.
I mean, some of those trips are like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So you gotta, it can rub in.
She loved Canberra.
Yeah.
But she's found trekking in Indonesia, trekking in the Himalayas difficult, living in Indonesia difficult.
Yeah.
And teaching in the state schools difficult, but she knows that she's having incredible influence and favour to do that.
She's very grounded, I think.
Yeah.
Sulawesi.
And has a good support network.
Now, I have been to Sulawesi. I've seen your project.
Firsthand.
In Kampung
Briefly.
Kanaan. We took a team there. Amazing work in restoration of the land there and helping people.
You saw the proof of it.
Yeah, helping people farm the local land with the most organic way possible.
Correct.
How did that come about?
Yeah, well, look, I'm theologically trained for ministry involved around the local church. But the community at Kampung Kanaan, where Dr. Jeff Hammond established the village for them, they're relocated, as you know, Christian people that were forcibly Islamized and relocated to the Christian island of North Sulawesi, or the Christian province.
Yes.
So Dr. Jeff Hammond, amazing man of God, amazing humanitarian, rescued them from the jihadists, set up the village for them. They had a 1/4 acre of land, very devout in their faith, and we went there to serve the community in 2015.
Yeah.
Jan was teaching English, and I soon realised they don't need my theological skills.
No, they need something else.
They're like someone that's strong in their right arm but limp in their left arm, that they're spiritually were really strong. A lot of the emotional scars of the forced Islamisation hadn't been dealt with.
Yeah.
And they were incredibly underweight and unhealthy and constantly going off to the hospitals and the doctors and the chemists, which was a journey of up to an hour. And I thought, it's got to be a better way. Yeah, that's right. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
So, and then I began to get a revelation. I'd preached it, but a revelation, you know how it becomes logos to rhema of John 10:10.
Yes.
The thieves come to destroy. Jesus said, I've come to give you life and more abundantly.
Yeah.
And then the prayer of John, which I'd preached many times, 3 John verse 2, I pray that you prosper in all things and be in health.
Yes.
Well, here are these very devout Christians. They're not in health.
Yeah.
I thought, I've got to do something about it. I really thought I've got to do something. I had the time. I was there fully embedded and preached on the weekends. So I have to do something, and investigated a whole lot of different methods of restoring the land from Korea and Japan. They were too complex for me. And one winter's night here in Perth, July winter's night, only 4 years ago, I was searching the internet for sustainable farming, and I developed this thing. I found this thing called permaculture. I thought, this is so simple. It's not complex. Then I researched it. It was founded by 2 Aussie guys in Tasmania in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Contacted the guy in Perth.
Yeah.
Within a few weeks, I'm doing a university course about sustainable permanent agriculture.
Yeah.
And before I know it, I've got the certificate in permaculture, and a part of that was a major project. And I thought, well, I've got plenty of land up there that's only growing unpalatable grass.
Yeah.
So with permaculture mentors, we developed a plan,
Mm-hmm.
put it into action, and you saw it probably only at the 2.5 year mark.
Yes.
And there was already ground cover, shrubs and trees within 2.5
and the
swales, which were a key
swales,
part of the design, within 2.5 years. So now it's that garden's only at the 3.5, 4 year mark.
You were growing there. What were you growing?
Well, basically, what it was all about was restoring the land and then growing things that are appropriate to that land.
Yeah.
And various stories.
Yeah.
Not monoculture, which is one crop. So really, and the more I got into it, the more I really discovered this is the plan of God. Genesis 2:15. Tend and care for the garden. Work the garden and care for it. That twofold thing. Whereas most people just work the land. They don't tend it.
Oh.
So it's that twofold. It's in the scriptures.
Yeah.
So the social progressives have taken what's really ours.
Yeah.
So I've been reclaiming it, and all I do comes from that theological basis of caring for the land and using.
And you're
the
also teaching the locals to do that.
While I was there, one of the school principal came to me and says, Phil, because I was trying to do seminars with the adults.
Yeah.
Started out with 7, ended up with 10. And she said, Phil, they're set in their ways. Focus on the kids.
Yeah.
And then I started twice a week while I was there teaching the kids. So I did 15, 20 lessons before everything was shut down with COVID, and established gardens with the kids, a forest garden with the kids. And because the design was right, when I was no longer able to go, because the design's right, working with nature, it's continued to prosper.
Wonderful. Now you also did, you had a garden here at Gijigana.
Yeah, so when I came home, I realised like April 2020, I'm not going back. I'm going to be stuck here for a while. And I thought, well, what I've learnt
I can apply here.
I did it in Australia. I did my studies in Australia.
Yeah.
Applied the same thing up there, not the same techniques, the same principles. Swales on contour, covering the soil with organic matter, planting locally available and locally appropriate vegetables and trees. And prior...
What were you planting?
What's that?
What were you planting?
Just a variety of things. Polyculture, a whole lot of stone fruit, a whole lot of citrus, variety. We've got to get free of the monoculture thing.
Yeah.
We're monotheistic when it comes to God, but when it comes to gardening, we need to be polyculture. And yeah, just a whole lot of things. And prior to being destroyed by the fires last month, I'd had a harvest of cabbages, broccoli. Got to think this is within 8 months.
Yeah, from nothing.
From nothing. And I've only recently...
All organically grown.
All organically
No
grown.
pesticides, no chemicals, nothing.
Not the plan of God, that is. And so it was only recently that I finished my kimchi and my sauerkraut that was from my harvest. Yep, so I've done it here and learned a whole lot of skills in the last year.
And obviously it was quite devastating. This is 5 or 6 weeks ago. The fire came through, right through that farm.
6 weeks ago today, I think. Yeah.
And it just ravaged everything.
But people ask me, how do I feel? And I say, well, look, my nephew lost his timber business. That was next door and I was using his land. So he
That's
lost
a bigger loss.
50 grand worth of uninsurable timber he lost. So he lost everything. Saved his house, but lost his business. So in light of that, I just lost 400 hours of work and, $5,000 or $6,000 worth of stuff. But, we'll quickly rebuild it. And we always were planning to have windbreaks, fire breaks, and sheep grazing it. Nature just beat us by a year.
Okay.
Because it's all planning. See, what I'm into, and permaculture teaches you, is get the plan right.
Yeah.
So we had the plan.
Yeah.
Just nature beat us in that case. We have the same thing up in Sulawesi fire. That's why fire breaks and having windbreaks, all very important. So in my mentoring and constantly in my dealings with Carpacana, are you maintaining the fire breaks?
Yeah.
Because that's the problem there and here.
Wow. Well, just to see this resilience and the outlook full of hope, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and you've got to have a plan. And so the plan, if it's implemented, works.
Wonderful. Okay, as we wrap this up, Phil, what's the legacy you'd like to pass on to the generations that follow? Yeah,
look, legacy regarding my children, and they're not there, but really all I can do now is pray for them, be their friend. We've established that. So the legacy for them is a living active faith that even though the local church is not everything, it's certainly a part of it. And for Indonesia, I've left a legacy of books and preaching, and even someone contacted me today actually for some wisdom. But in the village of Carpacana, the legacy is you can experience the prayer of John. You can prosper in all things. Unlike many people in Jakarta, Manado or Perth, you've got land that you can quickly restore using organic methods, which I think are really biblical, study nature, Romans 1 and 2. So I think the legacy I'm leaving to them and other Christian communities, and that's what my master's thesis is about, is that there are things you can do to restore your land. And just as you're a part of a local church, just as you live out your faith, you deal with issues like bitterness and unforgiveness, there's a physical dimension that you can deal with by having, if you've got the land, fruitful organic gardens and doing regular physical exercise. So the legacy is holistic health, I guess if I have to say it in 2 words, holistic health.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil, for coming. This living active, our faith is absolutely vital, and this outlook that Phil has in a holistic way to help people is wonderful, and I hope that you are benefiting from this as much as we are here in the studio. Do rate us, comment, give us feedback, and distribute this content wherever you're enjoying it. And come again, visit us again, go on the website, read these stories, listen to them, share with other people, and keep the kingdom alive in you. Because these stories are real, they are raw, they're from Australia, and they are kingdom stories, they are Christ stories in us. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again shortly.
Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Stories from Down Under. We'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and share these stories with your wider community. And remember, every story is worth sharing, including yours.